We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through every mistake, failure, and explosion that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
And a tired Chris, he, him.
And today we're talking about that time China shot down one of their own satellites and released a cloud of debris that spacecraft are still dodging today.
Oh, hell yeah, ASAT,
Woo!
finally.
We're getting all those ASAT tests. Now, I promise that this topic is one that we were always planning to cover and has nothing to do with present events in the world. That said, increasing tensions between superpowers and fears of a new space Cold War with sides being drawn all across the world, that's very relevant to this story too, so it just lines up very nicely.
Some extrabital Sputnik from the late 90s just gets activated accidentally. We have a rogue asset.
Yeah, oh dude, that would be the absolute best stalker mod, is you go into some random bunker and you find the button that just activates the Sputnik destroyer. I am glad that you remembered the name Istrebatel Sputnikov, though.
Even though I absolutely butchered it, trust me, it lives rent-free in my head.
Bit of an aside, I don't think you were on the episode where we talked about that. I thought that was the one where I told Joe and Tom.
No, that I was absolutely part of that one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I mean, I don't remember any of this, so it's all new to me.
Okay.
I didn't even know we were talking about China today. It's new to me, too.
I was doing that for your safety, guys. Imagine what would have happened if your government found out.
No, the Joe Tom episode you're thinking about was Polius.
Okay, but I remember we talked about Istrebatel Sputnikov in that.
Oh, gotcha.
When else did we talk about Istrebatel Sputnikov?
It was pretty early on, if I remember
All right,
correctly.
Quinn, you don't have to keep saying it. We know that you can say it correctly.
I-S. I actually don't know how to pronounce it.
All right, well, apparently you know how to pronounce it correcter than Chris, because you keep saying it. You're saying it like a, all right, dog clicker
I'm not
time,
trying
you
to
guys
coax
can
him.
do
I'm not
this.
trying to coax
This is how we
him.
say it. Click. All right, now it's your turn. Go ahead and say it.
Yeah, if you sign up at Cyborg Cat Tier, you get the 2 hours before every episode of me trying to coach them to say words good.
The shot collar's not working.
Yeah, and I have still not figured out how to properly say Qian Sushen's name. I guarantee you I butchered it right there. I'll have to figure that out. If you know Mandarin, let me know how to say his name properly. But yeah, current world events were not planned for this episode, but they do line up nicely. And specifically this episode, we are going to be delving into the history, design, and fallout of anti-satellite weapons.
In this case, China commits the big satellite slap and the world goes, yo, what? Only we're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and then every other major power in the world is kind of like, oh shit, we can do that now. This is a topic I have wanted to cover for a while, both because it ties to one specific and incredibly important moment in space history, and because it's very likely the warnings will be completely ignored and we will only get more debris clouds littering Earth's orbit. Because in response to this event, this anti-satellite test that created the largest orbital debris cloud ever, the US, Russia, and India all conducted their own tests to show that they can also turn low Earth orbit into the zero-G equivalent of the Somme. While none of these created as much debris as the one we're about to talk about, they still have added thousands of fragments that need to be tracked and avoided, almost all of them in Leo, the part of space where more than 80% of all satellites live. So this is a problem, I think.
Yeah.
Also, for this episode, there's not really one central source I can point to. So instead, I'll be relying on a number of articles and publications, notably from NASA and Space News. All links will be down below in the show notes.
Anti-satellite weapons.
Now, Ever since there have been satellites, people have wanted to destroy them. In fact, way back whenever we started this with the Sputnik series, one of the first headlines that appeared after the launch of Sputnik 1 was "Nuke the moon, Ike," and that is all caps, and they were urging President Eisenhower to nuke the world's first satellite out of the sky.
Jesus.
Which I do respect, especially because this was the time period where America didn't really have its own missiles, it just had bombers. So like Curtis LeMay is going to try and get a B-52 up there to bomb Sputnik. We're gonna get the Scientology DC-3s that travel between the stars, but it's just Curtis LeMay in a massive B-52.
With an atomic demolition charge in the back ready to kamikaze himself into the moon.
It's the late 50s and the Air Force brass have no fucking idea how space even works or what it even is. So they're like, yeah, we'll just keep flying up. That'll work.
I mean, yeah, we are joking, but you are right. This is the 1950s and like the Curtis LeMay Strategic Air Command. They would have tried stuff like this. And considering that one of the Air Force's first projects to do with space was called Dinosaur, and it was a spaceplane nuclear bomber. So not far off the mark. We will talk about that in the future someday.
Okay.
We have alluded to it a lot.
Oh yeah. I hope I've provided enough context, because otherwise people will just randomly hear me say, like, you know, just profess how much I like dinosaurs in this space history podcast.
We could make a podcast about dinosaurs too.
We absolutely could. Yeah, that would be our tie-in.
Failure to fossilize.
Yeah, we go and we find all of the animals, all of like the ancient animals that are still clinging around that really should have gone extinct, if we're all being honest here.
All right, I'll get to work on gathering the materials.
We're partnering with that colossal company, the one that brought back, like, colossal quotation marks.
What are you bringing back next month?
The dire wolf. Like, guys, we have brought back the T-Rex, and it's just like a really fucked up looking crocodile hatchling. Like, look at it. Look at how glorious it is.
We made a crocodile bipedal.
Oh no.
God's cursed us.
We've crossed a crocodile and a chicken and just decided, yeah, that's about as close as we can get.
Both of them hate human beings in equal measure.
They could totally bring back mammoths for farming, even if it's like low scale, because this would make the paleo people go fucking insane. So that, like, you know, Krungadoingus could actually enjoy mammoth meat fall out of loincloth, you know, like.
Yeah, like that is, I guarantee you that like 90% of the funding for all these de-extinct companies is paleo people who want to bring back better paleo cuisine, and like Saudi royals who really want to know what a dodo tastes like.
Bring back the parasites too. Make them eat it raw.
Ooh, bringing back the dire tapeworm.
The dire tapeworm.
Tapeworm.
Marketing it as a weight loss supplement.
I really wish that there was a way for us to have like a biologist on here to torture by bringing up these things.
Oh, I mean, one day we can talk about like what space does to the human like physiology.
Listen.
And then we can just subject them to dire tapeworm questions.
We're going to scavenge a tapeworm out of RFK's head. Cross it with the dire tapeworm.
There's a worm DMZ like in his throat between the tapeworms and the brain worms.
That's why he always sounds so fucked up.
It's just a minefield in his larynx where neither side, the worms are having their own Cold War in there.
No, they're just going full 3-body problem. I'll kill us all if you go in any further.
Yeah, it's basically Osmosis Jones, but with mutually assured destruction.
Who gave Osmosis Jones and WMD?
Now, in the decades since Sputnik 1 launched, dozens of separate projects were developed on all sides of the Cold War to try and nullify the growing advantages of satellites. This being a new field, these weapons also took all kinds of forms. There was no established, this is what an ASAT is.
Makes sense.
Also, to clarify, anti-satellite, ASAT. Nice and simple. We talked about this a little bit in some previous episodes, including our episode on Polyus, the late 80s Soviet attempt to build a nuclear laser battle satellite.
The Russians really did go in on lasers, even ground-based.
Yeah, just thinking back to that Soviet tank with like several $1 billion worth of rubies in it.
I want to say it was something like 50 kilos of artificially grown rubies just in a tank.
Oh, the absolute best battle salvage. If you just like walk up to a burned out tank and find a ruby the size of your fist.
That's what you get at like the end of a raid in Tarkov.
Oh, dude, even better. If you're a crewman and you survive that thing being destroyed, you come out looking like that North Korean guy in James Bond in the James
from
Bond
Die
movie.
Another Day.
Yeah, except it's just red instead of diamonds.
Then you just become English.
All right, no. This guy is a Twilight 2K villain. No one steal that.
Imagine getting blasted by the laser tank, though.
It's what do shotguns fire with like salt in it?
Rock salt?
Rock salt. Yeah, it's that, but it's just tiny little rubies. It's a canister round full of rubies.
That's what a Saudi royal would shoot at you from their tank.
Oh, yeah, like if Saudi royals did North Korean style like anti-aircraft gun executions.
Just shotgun blasting a guy with precious gems.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it'd be I ran this man over at like 250 miles an hour in a Bugatti Chiron.
I spent $3 million on a real-life 40K bolter shell, including the diamond tip, and I'm going to shoot it at this journalist who said that I bought one more Hawk than I actually said I did.
Listen, his body just did that.
Now, the earliest attempts at these weapons were the Soviet IS, or Istrebitel Sputnikov, which translates to Destroyer of Satellites, and the American Saint, which is Satellite Interceptor. I like the Soviet one more.
Yeah, no, that one goes hard. Saint is just, it's too limp.
Yeah. Both of these are what we would call direct ascent anti-satellite missiles. They don't operate in space. In action, they'd actually never even reach orbit. Instead, they were basically just a surface-to-air missile that could fly a bit higher. A satellite would fly over the launch site, the missile would be launched against it, and it would either slam into the target or explode near enough that it could, like, pepper it with shrapnel.
Yeah, wait a second. I thought the Strebitl Sputniks, I thought those were persistently in space, and then they just had their almonds activated.
No, those were launched as interceptors.
Okay.
They were large interceptors, but they did not have the capability to stay in orbit. Although both the Soviets and the Americans did design persistent space-based weapons.
Some very smart rocks, if you will.
Now, over the course of the Cold War, these weapons would evolve in all kinds of interesting directions, a lot of them very dumb. But there was never a shortage of funding because even as early as the 1960s, satellites were a vital part of war, and every side knew that they needed ways to destroy them. Like, if you could knock out an opponent's satellite network, you had a huge military advantage. For their part, the Soviets developed all kinds of IS successors, boasting better accuracy and more advanced launchers. They also attempted to militarize their spacecraft, famously bolting an autocannon on the outside of the Salyut 3 space station and designing an entire fleet of Salyut-based orbital battle cruisers.
Hell yeah.
Tragically, they never got to fly. Also, my favorite, the Shit 2, which translates to Shield 2, which was basically just like a Sidewinder that you could bolt on the side of either a station or a Soyuz. You know, basically, Korolev, he did the thing he did anytime he ran out of money, which was go to the military and pretend that whatever project he was working on was a weapon. And parts of that was like, yeah, we can totally dogfight with Soyuzes.
Just the world's slowest positioning battle.
Meanwhile, the Americans worked to perfect air-launched anti-satellite missiles, like the experimental Bold Orion and the High Virgo. These early missiles were fairly simple. They carried nuclear warheads, so they only needed to get within a couple of kilometers of their targets to take them out. But as space became more crowded, the US realized they couldn't nuke any enemy satellites without also nuking their own and, like, wiping out a good chunk of space. So yeah, they started gravitating towards kinetic interceptors the same way the Soviets had. During the Reagan years, though, they came out with the Strategic Defense Initiative, or the Star Wars program, which famously planned to launch hundreds of tiny interceptor satellites and keep them in orbit, ready to attack enemy missiles or satellites at a moment's notice. We will definitely be talking about the Star Wars program in detail in future series.
Yeah, what's it called? So, homing overlay was part of SDI.
Oh, okay.
And it was one of the very early forays into full-on hit-to-kill systems.
Is this the one where they have the video of the interceptor thing flying?
No, that was a proper kinetic kill vehicle. This is like its grandfather.
Is this the one with the big wings that spread out?
Yeah, it's you remember the flying meme missile that, you know, the samurai missile that we drop on people?
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
I dropped it into DMs. There you go.
So I did read up a little bit about this. What we're talking about here is an early attempt at an American kinetic interceptor weapon. And because accuracy wasn't all that great back then, what this did was the warhead of this missile would like flower open and release like 30 giant blades coming out the side to like significantly increase how like the forward cross section of this missile, and basically just like slice through anything it was fired at.
Yeah, if you have an expected accuracy of, I don't know, 4 feet,
Yeah,
then just make
a
your
really
missile
big
wider.
fan. Yeah, it's basically the R9X for space.
It's got more blades though, so it's automatically cooler.
Now, another thing to note is how anti-satellite projects are often tied in with anti-ballistic missile development. And, you know, while we're on that point, they're also tied in with ballistic missile development. After all of these weapons, like both anti-satellite and anti-ballistic missiles, aim to destroy a target moving in a relatively predictable path in space. Both ABMs and ASATs are often just developed from ballistic missiles, since they can already reach space, they can already be stored in silos, and you can easily modify them to carry new weapons, warheads, whatever. Long story short, a lot of the time for both the Soviets and the Americans, the exact same rockets would wound up being used as ballistic missiles, anti-ballistic missiles, and anti-satellite weapons. Because it's, you know, you've got a good building block. It can get to space. That's all you really need. However, while both ballistic missiles and anti-ballistic missiles have been negotiated for and tightly controlled via international agreements, there has never been a serious attempt to control or limit the proliferation of anti-satellite weapons. This also goes for just any kind of weapon in space. Under current laws, the only kinds of weapons that are not allowed in space are nuclear, WMDs. Otherwise, you can put a gun on your spacecraft, you can put a missile on your spacecraft, you can fire a missile at another spacecraft.
You can give your astronaut a Glock and send him over to another station.
Yeah, and this also extends to infrastructure. Like under the rules of war, for example, the American GPS system is operated by the military. It is a legal military target. And this is something we're kind of going to get into. A whole lot of space hardware is either a valid military target or would be damaged in a conflict in space. And this is stuff that billions of people on the ground rely on. Like, space militarization has so much more potential to fuck with the civilian side than practically anything else. If a war happens in low Earth orbit, there are no safe zones, there are no front lines or anything. It's just going to be everywhere.
You're getting Kesslered hard, buddy.
Yeah. Now, with the end of the Cold War, the militarization of space has not slowed down. In fact, it's sped up. More countries are joining the race, with India, Russia, China, and the US all having proven capabilities to shoot down satellites. Even worse, the anti-satellite weapons of today are evolving. Direct kinetic impactors fired on modified ballistic missiles, those are still the classics. But they have been joined by concepts for killer satellites, weapons that remain in orbit and maneuver to rendezvous with their prey. Once there, they might explode, or fire some kind of projectile, or jam the enemy satellite, or, my personal favorite, disable a spy satellite by covering it in goo, just spraying all over its optics.
Okay, that's actually...
That one
funny as
actually
hell.
does, yes.
Wait, is that real?
It's a concept.
I hope it is.
That's the we're about to get to that, but that's the problem. No one wants to admit if they have weapons in space, even though there are almost definitely some up there.
Disappointment. The disappointment when you said it's a concept, as though there isn't just one of them out there that does that, you know?
No,
Like,
give me the foam gun satellite. I want an astronaut to have to go up there just completely pissed that they now have to sit there and scrape all this goo off.
Getting sent out on an EVA with a super soaker full of like the YTV goop.
And then getting gooed again by another satellite.
having a space program where your anti-satellite weapon is sending a guy up there with silly string.
Yeah, basically, yes. Like watching the optics on my have you guys ever been through a car wash where they have like the colorful foam?
Of course.
That's just all you see.
That's
now.
just what you see out of your $1 trillion spy satellite. It's just like, oh well, the colors are at least pretty. At least at least the Chinese sprung for the good stuff.
Just down in Langley chain smoking cigarettes. Just what the fuck is this?
It's a very interesting concept, but at the same time, it could also be sorted out by a simple engineering fix, which is a windshield wiper.
What if it's too sticky?
I also love going back to the concept of there's just a satellite whose entire existence is to just vibe until
It gets
it needs
activated.
to explode and kill someone else. Like me in the pod until my sleeper phrase is activated, and then I'll explode in the booth, and my bones and meat shrapnel will kill everyone near me.
Bert Sibrel just gets brought out.
I do love the idea that, yeah, like someone has to be, you can't just turn it off. It can't just be defunct. Someone has to spend their days sitting in mission control for the satellite that does nothing until it explodes. And your whole job is like, has it exploded yet? Nope.
You sit at a console all day, and
With
you just
one
monitor
with
your
one
satellite
button on it.
your satellite buddy for your entire career.
Oh, dude, that guy is going to be so sad when that satellite explodes. His one little buddy is just going to be gone.
I monitored this satellite for 20 years.
I knew it when it was but a child.
I'm also now thinking with the silly string satellite, like you could totally tag someone else's satellite with that. There's got to be orbital graffiti by now.
How many dicks have been drawn in the ISS?
Now, I do have to say concepts for these because none of these killer satellites are proven to exist, but we do have a lot of possible candidates in orbit. Space is kind of weird like that, where it's practically impossible to hide a space launch or a satellite drifting in orbit, but it's very easy to hide what that satellite does. I know we've talked about this a lot in different episodes, but like this can be an intelligence based thing, or you can just do what the Soviets did and name everything Cosmos.
We know what it is. You don't need to know what it is.
Yeah, what does it do? It does satellite stuff. What do you want me to say? I know we've talked about it extensively, like bits and pieces here and there, but I need to do an entire episode and just talk about the Cosmos method and like how it was both used. Like it contains doomsday weapon satellites, just normal run-of-the-mill miscellaneous satellites, and also like a whole gamut of failed missions that are just like spinning in orbit. A lot of fun. But yeah, like I do need to be fair, none of these killer satellites are actually known or proven to exist.
How can we believe you?
I don't know that you can.
What if you're trying to get a job with the government and you're just lying to us?
That would make me the biggest sucker on the fucking planet, though. Like, if I'm doing pro bono psyop shit in order to try
What I'm saying
and
is
prove
they
to
told
the
you
government,
you already know that you're lying, and you're lying you're lying to us to prove that you are deserving of your security clearance.
Okay,
No, I'm fully on board for the recreational psyop.
yeah, just like my extracurricular work on my CV is like I have convinced this many thousand people that killer satellites don't exist.
I've grown a robust network of psychopaths.
I have psyoped my entire network.
I'm so good at it, I psyoped myself.
Going on LinkedIn, like, killer satellites do not exist, and just nothing else, no context, no nothing.
just all caps. No, I mean, come on, you gotta spice it up. You have to make it look like a conspiracy post. You have to have like some weird, obscure, or just nonsensical biblical image, probably generated by AI these days. Lots of all caps, and then like alternating. Like in your explanation sentences, you just alternate between capitalizing the first letter of a word and not.
Ooh, like leave some fun little tidbits for the like numerology folks to follow along with.
Yeah, put fun tidbits for the numerology folks. Put like way too much punctuation.
Ooh.
The schizo has found a pattern in the numbers.
What's actually kind of weird about this, though, is you do. I'm not going to say conspiracy brain, but you do kind of have to be a little bit conspiracy brain, because all of the main three governments developing ASATs right now, they also do a shitload of conspiracy stuff about this, because if you listen to like it, right now, you can find a whole bunch of articles about how like America needs to militarize space. And the reason why is they say like, oh, like they insist that China and Russia both have Death Stars in orbit. And then if you read Chinese or Russian like kind of military news like that, they're saying the exact same thing. All three of them are either utterly convinced or lying and pretending to be convinced that the other two have like battle fleets in orbit, which I guess is basically just doing like the missile gap thing again of if you pretend that the enemy has more than you, then you can get government to pay for it.
I mean, what if we just took it even further and we go back to the original suicide satellite concept and then just put a nuclear bomb in it, you know?
that is something that may or may not exist. It is one of the possible candidates.
Granted, like, I'm not, a military satellite expert, so I don't know how hardened these things are to such attacks, but...
Oh, they get wiped out. Satellites are the flimsiest things on the planet. They get killed by paint chips.
Well, I'm just saying, like...
How fast is that paint chip going?
It's not a blast wave thing, because, like, I'm pretty sure, like, the EMP goes farther out than just the blast wave. And ideally, like, the concept here is that you're just frying satellites. Like, it's just like this isn't the first thing you'd do, but, like, if you were getting fucked, it's like, all right, well, I guess nobody's going to have a satellite now.
We got scorched space policy. So, like, whenever it comes to putting satellites in orbit, again, like, it's very hard to hide a launch or to hide something that is moving around in orbit because it's very predictable. What you can hide is what they're actually doing, because most satellites generally look like a box with some solar panels on the side. And the only way that you can figure out what a satellite is actually doing or what its role is by looking at its orbit, its size, and what it's doing to maneuver. Like, that's the most real intelligence you can do. And this mystery is big enough that it has actually led to its own subset of secret satellites. These are so-called inspector satellites. These are also believed to exist but not confirmed, and they are basically small maneuverable satellites that track an enemy satellite in order to spy on it. And as one potential candidate for this, I will point out Russia's Cosmos 2542 satellite that is likely spying on a US keyhole spy sat. It's in the same orbit and it's tracking, like, basically right behind it. That one's also cool because it deployed a mini satellite that further went on to do some spy shit, probably. So basically, they probably exist. We have a bunch of candidates operated by the US, China, and Russia. However, all three of those governments massively overstate how developed the other two are for the sake of trying to get their own funding. In all likelihood, there are like one or two per nation. Anyway, all of that is a primer on the history and evolution of anti-satellite weapons, which I'm now going to use to segue us back to the test that we are talking about today. Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
The SC-19 test.
Now, on January 11th, 2007, the Fengyun 1C, or FY-1C, a Chinese government weather satellite, was struck and destroyed by a kinetic kill vehicle launched by a ballistic missile. Since the interceptor flew to meet the satellite head-on, the relative impact speed was around 9 kilometers per second. Which is a fucking lot.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah, the FY-1C was not large as far as satellites went, and the impact force shattered it into tens of thousands of fragments. Of the ones that were, like, basically, the ones that you can track in orbit is anything bigger than a golf ball, or some sources describe it as bigger than 10 centimeters. It produced more than 3,000 of those, and innumerable, likely tens of thousands of fragments smaller than that, all of them shotgunned across low Earth orbit. As a military or government asset, Fengyun was negligible. It was launched in 1999, it operated until 2004, and they still had contact with it until 2005, which is admirable because the thing was only supposed to last until 2001. It led a good life. It was a good satellite, and it did not deserve this.
And it got taken out back and shot in the head with a 12 gauge.
It was a good satellite, but a rotten way to die.
Yeah.
It got old Yellard.
Everyone else is reacting to this test with like, oh my god, they're militarizing space, or the military guys are like, oh my god, China just revealed its new capability, and I'm the only one here who's just like, justice for Fengyun 1C. It was too young to die. So even then, by 2007, they could somewhat still maintain contact with it, but it wasn't actually providing good weather data, which made it a perfect target. Now, we don't know a whole lot about the internal workings or history of the Chinese ASAT program, But we do know that the political will to back the development of these weapons crystallized around the late 90s and the early 2000s. In 1999, the US bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, Serbia, killing 3 Chinese journalists. And then, in 2001, the US began revamping its own aging ASAT weapons, and then withdrew completely from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002, reneging on any previous commitments against militarizing space. Basically, China saw itself as being behind in these new spheres of combat, and they saw the US moving ahead, so they tried to catch up, starting several initiatives to boost China's high-tech combat capabilities. So that's stuff like cyber warfare, precision munitions, and crucially, space warfare. Viewed through this lens, I do think it needs to be mentioned how quickly and effectively this program was able to get its product working. Again, we don't know the behind-the-scenes politics and funding, and I have been very clear about believing that militarization of space is a horrible idea. But in pure pragmatic terms, going from political approval to a working weapons system in less than 5 years is impressive and speaks to how much priority the Chinese military put on its ASATs. A lot of this is also because the project seems to have heavily leveraged COTS hardware, or consumer off-the-shelf. Practically nothing on this new ASAT weapon was actually new, instead being Frankenstein together out of existing ballistic missile, anti-ballistic missile, and a small sat booster, and that small sat booster was also a ballistic missile. As slapdash as it sounds, this process works. It saves time and money. It means that you don't need to test your hardware as much because someone else has already done it for you. And it means you've already got a supply chain built and ready to go to support you. It's a good idea, and it does seem to have paid off. And I do need to say, by the exact same token, I don't know the behind the scenes of this, we just kind of know the results. We also don't know how well this weapon works, if it's, easy to maintain or not. This program could have been an absolute nightmare and shit show behind the scenes, which, knowing space and military programs, I'm willing to bet is more likely than not.
It's just a matter of how hard was the dial cranked.
Exactly. And I do think it was cranked a lot because they got it done quick.
Ooh.
We're going to talk, they have successful tests of this thing that don't hit satellites. They deliberately miss. In 2005, which is 3 years after approval. Anyway, we don't know the name of the weapon that struck Fengyun 1C. It's been tentatively given the name SC-19 by the United States, though. And despite all the ultra-high-tech ASAT concepts I talked about before, this one's pretty vanilla. It's just a kinetic interceptor bolted on top of a ballistic missile. That's kind of it. It gets launched towards a target, guides itself in, and slams into it, hopefully. As far as we know, that is it. It doesn't even have a warhead, instead trusting that a tiny hunk of metal going, Mach fuck is going to do enough damage to get the job done.
Miles per second.
In this case, in this test, 9 kilometers per second. Well, no, it's not going that fast, but whenever you look, the satellite's velocity
Are you talking about,
would have
the
been...
closing speed?
I'm talking about the closing speed, yeah, what these two pieces of hardware experience, because a satellite in the orbit of Fengyun 1C would be expected to be around 7.5-ish kilometers per second. The SC-19 was also coming in very fast, but it was coming in at, they weren't going, I think I said head on, they were not going nose to nose here. Still, really fast, more than enough for a small hunk of metal to absolutely atomize a satellite. What we do know is that the SC-19 weapon was launched on a modified Dongfang 21 missile. This is an intermediate-range ballistic missile, or IRBM, and it has been a cornerstone of China's nuclear capability for over 30 years. It's also interesting to us because it has become the central building block, the main Lego piece for literally dozens of other Chinese weapons and space projects. There are Long March rockets that owe something to the Dongfang 21. It is the core of China's new anti-ship ballistic missiles. It's been modified to be air-launchable somehow. It can be fitted with all the fancy new hypersonic glide vehicles, and, of course for us, it's been turned into several different ASATs.
I wonder how many sets removed it is from our the gentleman whose name we cannot sufficiently pronounce.
I believe I don't know if he personally had a hand in it, because it was flying. It first flew in the 90s. He was definitely still alive, and he was definitely still alive and active though.
But he probably didn't have a direct hand.
I think it was made by CAST. We'll get to it, but the Chinese space program is split up basically into OKBs. They're not called OKBs, but they're state-run companies, and they all fucking hate each other.
I'm just imagining I'm making up a new guy.
Oh boy.
A guy who is like Chinese netizen paid by Beijing to make shit posts online, and he makes an image of one of the Dongfang rockets, and it's like, like one of the bigger ones, and then like the text is just like "Big Dong is back, baby."
Oh, it could be just like those ads the Soviets made to try and sell their rockets. Yeah, like Big Dong's back on the market.
King Long March 5, we got the Fat 5 on the pad ready to go.
Your rocket, it's a picture of a small tiny Long March 2. My rocket, it's the Dongfang 21, which is also not that tall. It's just thick. Like it's a one of the things
Grossmeister.
Like I believe the Dongfang 21 was developed based off of a submarine launched ballistic missile. Like missile lineages are weird like that.
Wait, developed from submarine?
Yeah. They took a submarine, they took an SLBM, and then they turned it into a road-launched IRBM.
Huh.
Which I guess is similar, like it goes in a tube and it travels around, but...
Leaves tube, kills everything, got it.
Yeah, basically a lot of, like, especially submarine-launched missiles, this is a weird tangent, but it's just to give you a sense of scale, they're not that tall, they're like 2-3 stories tall at max, and what they are is they're just really fucking thick. They're stubby. They have the flight characteristics of a baby carrot. Is that the right word? Baby carrot for like the small little ones you buy in the
short and stubby
in a bag? Yeah.
I'll never forget how devastated I was to learn that they're just shavings of a bigger carrot.
They are?
Yeah,
what?
but they're not baby carrots. They're just baby carrots are just like shaved like dumples of a whole carrot.
That is awful, and that also means that there's so much carrot waste. Like, to get that perfect shape, how much of there must be so much carrot shavings that are not unless you could recycle them and recompact them.
I also just realized I dropped the term dumple on you, and you may not have realized.
The big dumpling. Big dumpling.
The name dumpling implies the existence of a larger dumple.
The dumple. Now, the launch site I do know a bit more about. The SC-19 in question lifted off from Xichang Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan Province. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but, I only care about pronouncing if I want to show respect, and Xichang does not deserve respect. You, listener, may have heard us talk about this specific launch site before, and if you've ever seen news articles about Chinese rocket launches, chances are they are talking about Xichang. This is because, unlike coastal launch sites like Wenchang, Xichang is based way far inland, and its launch paths take rockets over several of China's most populated regions.
Yes, it's made to maximize security and the chance of dropping a booster.
Yeah, that way, anytime we drop a booster, it falls on Chinese territory, right safe at home. It also has downranges. A downrange, for context, is the area where you expect different rocket parts to fall based on when they're ejected in their flight. And several of those downranges are just smacked right on top of towns and villages. This is why if you see news about Chinese rockets dropping fairings or entire engines just onto someone's house, they are talking about Xichang.
Is that also really the best site that they have?
As I understand it, Xichang was set up for secrecy. Because it's like, yeah.
Me secretly dropping an entire booster of my rocket on my civilian populace
security
downwind.
As in also cool. Get to it through the entirety of, the Chinese mainland.
Yeah.
Excuse me launching my rocket from my super top secret facility and having a booster land on my civilian populace downrange.
But there's also there's another Chinese spaceport that is inland, but it's really more of a Baikonur situation because it fires into all of its downranges are in Siberia and the completely unpopulated really north steppes of China.
You're just slamming into a desert.
Yeah, whereas Xichang's drop, depending on what rocket you're firing, it has downranges that are in a couple of villages right on China's incredibly populated coast and then in Taiwan, which I do find hilarious. Maybe that was just a fuck you to Taiwan, and unfortunately as part of that it means that everyone else in China is, in the firing line.
It just happens to perfectly miss Taiwan, and they can just drag it ashore and be like, hey, you want some Chinese rocket parts?
And Xichang is also possibly the site of maybe the most lethal space disaster in human history. We do not know because the official figures are the conspiracy figures are 500 people died, and the official figures are that no one died. And it's probably a number in between. We will definitely be talking about that in the future, though, because it is just like, if you've ever seen an image of a Chinese rocket leaving the pad, getting like 10 feet in the air, and then immediately pulling a 90-degree turn, that's what we're talking about.
Oh, I introduced some coworkers to the horror that was Intelsat.
Ooh, fun. So yeah, like we will be talking about Xichang in detail in future episodes, but for our purposes today, it also has a ballistic missile test launch site, which is where our humble SC-19 flew out of. And I know I'm kind of like jumping around with this, but that's because there's really nothing to say about the actual launch itself. As far as we know, the SC-19 did its job. It flew up, it slammed into the satellite, and it destroyed it.
It did its job beautifully.
Yeah, and that means that kind of going at it sequentially is weird. Like normally in a story like this, I'd be able to, and I would have a lot of fun telling you all about the fun internal politics and setbacks in a project. And again, I am sure that absolutely all of those did happen here. It is a perfect storm for dumb rivalries and office politics, and I really wish I knew about them. For example, the SC-19, as far as we know, is operated by China's rocket forces. So they have a dedicated military branch that owns all of their ballistic missiles, I think except the submarine ones. And similar to the US, there was like a huge debate over like, all right, is the Army going to get it, the Air Force, the Navy? And then I think Mao just kind of said like, no, rocket forces.
It's a rocket after all. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of cool because they have had, like, the rocket forces have been around since 1966, back when, like, China's first missile was like a Soviet V-2 knockoff that they got secondhand. But still, yeah, these are the guys who operate the SC-19, but the Xichang launch site is operated by the Air Force, whom the rocket forces hate with a passion. Similarly, much of China's space industry is split between state-owned companies like CAST and CALT, C-A-S-T, C-A-L-T, who constantly bicker and compete over contracts like their old Soviet OKBs. Again, I have no doubt that all of that played into the development of this weapon and the running of this test, but because everything around the SC-19 is tightly guarded by Beijing, we've got no evidence, and I can't point to anything solid, unfortunately. What we do know is that the test worked. If there was some kind of failure, it wasn't enough to stop the kinetic kill vehicle atomizing Fengyun 1C and consequently spreading a huge debris cloud through low Earth orbit. There had been 2 previous tests in 2005 and 2006, respectively, that deliberately missed their targets. So, China had successfully demonstrated their ability to rapidly generate and test a new advanced weapon capability, and in doing so, they gave every other nation on Earth an excuse to test their own. Even worse, because of how big the debris cloud from the SC-19 test was, all of those other countries could do tests like that were marginally less polluting and then point at China and just say they did it worse. This is what happened like immediately after this. In 2008, there was a shoot down. What did they call it? They called it like it was Operation Burnt Frost.
Okay, that's actually a pretty cool name.
I think it fucking sucks. I think it's the most like tactical bullshit I've ever heard.
I know, and I love
certainly
it for
is a tactical bullshit name. I have to agree.
I'm not arguing that part.
We're not attacking you, other Chris.
No, we are.
Okay, you know what? Fuck you. Just because it's a garbage name doesn't mean I can't love it.
So what happened in 2008, this Operation Burnt Frost, was that the US shot down one of their own spy satellites. And they claimed that it wasn't a test, and it was definitely not a response to China. Actually, this was a favor to the entire world. See, that satellite had hydrazine fuel in it. It had a couple of pounds of it in there. And they were worried about the environmental harm that it could do to the planet if it re-entered, so they blew it the fuck up instead.
Again, Intelsat coughing vigorously in the background.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that the hydrazine still entered the atmosphere. Blowing it up doesn't change that.
No, they just spread it out a little bit. Come on.
And again, like the entire world knows that this is just like a tit for tat with China. And then in the decades since, I believe the most recent test was 2021, a Russian ASAT test that released about 1,700 detectable fragments, so half as much as the ASAT, but still a lot. That is still a 15% increase in debris in low Earth orbit. It's a lot.
Still had to be dick waving, though.
Yeah, and then you've got, like, China has done multiple more tests with the SC-19. India's gotten involved.
It just never stops.
Yeah, and again, I am not saying this, like, I'm not trying to defend China on this, but I have also seen people saying, like, oh, they started this arms race. Like, no, every single one of these countries wanted to do this. They are all eager to do this, and they all constantly they do the shoot and cry thing where they say like,
someone had to open the door first. That is all.
Exactly. And then all of them get to follow through and say like, man, I'm not happy to have crossed this threshold, but China made me do it.
Sprinting across the threshold, furiously signing checks to start their own programs. How dare you make me do this?
I'm bringing my friend Palantir with me.
God damn it.
Yeah. That is the one nice thing about all of like the militarization of space stuff is I know it's like likely not going to work well because it's being handed to like a bunch of startups that are going to waste tens of billions and get nothing done.
The startups that can't help but act like startups and then fail like startups.
Oh, hell yeah.
The reaction.
Now, in talking about this, I'm going to keep the political and military response stuff brief. Needless to say, many countries were not thrilled with the results of China's ASAT test. The standard response from the US and Russia was to denounce the test, insist that their country was always against the militarization of space, and then accelerate their own space-based weapons programs.
Crank it to 11, got it.
It's unfortunate, but this trick does keep working, and basically, like right up to today, you are seeing this going on today. You claim that you really don't want to militarize space, but since your enemies are doing it, you kind of have to not fall behind. I really sure do hate putting all of this money into space-based weapons, but if I don't do it...
You said shooting, what's called shooting and crying. This is laughing while shooting.
Yeah, this is like, oh god, I sure wish I didn't have to do this, but I totally do. And this isn't just the US. This is the exact same excuse used by Russia and China and India now. Because all of them are aware of how unpopular and batshit insane the idea of militarizing space is, but all of them really want to do it. So they all pretend like they're being dragged along kicking and screaming.
Why is it so asinine?
Yeah, and it keeps working. And it's with excuses like this that every single ASAT operating country justifies spending billions to maintain the ones they have and develop better ones.
I'm not gonna get mad.
You should. It's content.
No, because it's going to turn into a screed. You're going to let it?
Screed. Do it.
Yeah,
Do
scream. It. Screed. Scream your screed.
Screeding. No.
Fine.
It's going to come naturally.
Hey, Chris, can you put
up
more
right
nickel
now.
in that alloy so that we can launch it into space and crash it into a satellite and just spray it everywhere? Thanks.
I know what you're doing.
Another fun thing about space debris is that do you guys remember the Cosmos? Do you remember the Roarsat space bukkake?
Of course.
I could never.
Each one of those little radioactive lithium blobs is still up there and is considered space debris. You can just get got by a frozen raindrop of pure metal. Now, for what it's worth, it's believed that China did not expect the amount of debris to come out of that test, and they were embarrassed by the very public backlash against the test.
Guys, we loaded a shotgun, obliterated the satellite, and we're kind of surprised at what happened.
And like, I don't know how they couldn't have expected it. Like, based on where that satellite was, there is no way to do this test cleanly. The debris didn't happen because they did it wrong. It happened because of which satellite they hit. So I don't know if someone just lied to them or if they just ignored a report somewhere along the way, because they have no business being surprised and embarrassed by this.
Oh, I'm voting on just it wasn't considered.
Oh, no. See, Fengyun 1C was in a comparatively high orbit compared to most LEO satellites, which means that the debris from its destruction would last decades instead of months. This is not to say that other tests are better, because every ASAT weapon is going to send debris all over the place. But whenever the US, Russia, the Soviets originally, I believe India as well, and now China in the test since, they have all struck very low altitude satellites, which means that most of the debris deorbits within a couple of months. Again, still very bad. And despite that embarrassment, none of this was enough to stop or even slow development and deployment of the SC-19. But China did move to lower orbit, lower debris type tests in the years since. Still, again, need to be clear on this. Militarizing space is bad, and they're just doing it by polluting slightly less. They're just doing it a slightly better way of doing a very bad thing.
They put the eco-friendly sticker on it into smiley face.
Yeah, they're greenwashing the thing. They're greenwashing Kessler syndrome.
How I learned to stop worrying and love space pollution.
Now, the main focus here for us is the debris cloud, the impact it has had and will continue to have on the space industry, and how we're likely to see a lot more events like this in the future. And instead of kind of like talking around the issue like I've been doing, I wanted to break it down into the important factors of why this test was so bad, specifically the orbit and the altitude. So first, the orbit. Despite what a lot of Kessler syndrome panic will have you believe, orbital debris mostly stays in the same orbit as the satellite that made it. Even considering parts that are flung away by the hypersonic impact, they normally form like a spread or cloud around the original orbit. It's not like enough to shift them from polar to equatorial orbits, say.
Mm-hmm.
This might seem good because it means that spacecraft can simply avoid that orbit. However, that doesn't work in practice. First, Fengyun 1C was in a near-polar orbit. This means that instead of orbiting along the equator, it orbits over the north and south poles, and as the Earth spins, that orbit means that it slowly tracks over every point on Earth. This is very useful for, like, spy satellites, anything where you want to do Earth observation, or in this case, weather. This also means that the orbit is harder to avoid, because as the debris swings down north to south, it sweeps through practically every other orbit. It's not as dangerous as being, like, right in the affected orbit, like flying into the cloud, but if you're flying in an equatorial orbit, you still have the risk of being T-boned by a hypersonic paint ship. And we'll get to that, it has happened.
Wait, it has?
The other problem is that Fengyun's orbit, specifically, is popular. And it's popular for other weather observation satellites. Like, whenever it comes to orbits, countries and companies don't get to call dibs. If an orbit is well suited for a job, be it weather monitoring, spying, telecoms, whatever, it will wind up hosting many satellites. So, this test and the debris cloud, it put a major chunk of all weather satellites, like the entire weather monitoring capability of Earth at the time, at risk, because they were all locked in the exact same orbit with the death cloud now.
Yeah, everyone get in the death cloud.
Thankfully, they have since kind of like shifted away. People aren't using the death cloud as much. Whenever it comes to this debris, it's still up there. You know, like this isn't, with space, you can't really, you can't just lock off an orbit, but they have basically tried with this one. You know, there is just a ring, a vertical ring around Earth where people will try to not put satellites if they can afford it because, you know, they might get got by Fengyun. The ghost of Fengyun is going to hunt them down.
Yeah, because they did Fengyun dirty.
Brand new guy coming up. CEO of a company that owns a really expensive satellite that doesn't want to reposition it because the cost of using the propellant is just too much to bear.
Another problem is the altitude that Fengyun 1C operated at. It was more than 800 kilometers. This is on the high end for a low Earth orbit satellite, but still well within the range that it's dangerous for everyone else. It's kind of like the Goldilocks zone of danger. It's low enough to interfere with other satellites, but high enough that instead of taking months or weeks to degrade, the orbit from Fengyun 1C is going to be up there for centuries. This is, I need to be clear about this, this is a massive amount of debris that will stay up there for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to quote an article from NASA. The deposition of more than 2,000 Fengyun 1C debris in low Earth orbit represented an immediate increase of more than 1/3 in the cataloged debris environment, a population which had taken 50 years to accumulate. The majority of the new debris was found near the altitude of the Fengyun 1C breakup. So, this one test increases all of the debris in low Earth orbit by 50% in one day. And it's not stuff that's going to go away quickly. It's still like, you can look at the charts that NASA and other space agencies have put out, and it's just going, it's tracking up and up and up as more satellites are launched and they die, and then it just goes vertical.
The hardest spike in history.
In January 2007. And there's another test, I believe, in the 80s that the Americans do that produces about half as much debris. Like I said, in 2021, the Russians do one that produces half as much debris as Fengyun. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that, like, space debris is a problem, and it will continue to be a problem just from the operation of space. Things are going to happen. But whenever you look at these charts, the things that drive it, the things that are the biggest producers of space debris, it's weapons tests. That's all it is. That's like
all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like, without weapons tests, for 50 years, it just slowly ramps up, and then Fengyun gets blown the fuck up. and suddenly we're dealing with 50% more debris. So, yeah, that is basically what we've got. I wish there was a lesson here, there is a lesson here. There's a very fucking obvious lesson here, which is don't militarize space. But that is not a lesson that anyone in power is ever going to listen to. So, in conclusion, we've got a test done because one nation thought they were falling behind a rival. And then that rival used the existence of the test to justify their own program, starting a new arms race that is going to destroy space, basically.
Just make everything worse.
Yes. And I read an article. It didn't tie in much with this, but it was basically talking about how, more so than any other environment, orbit is going to get horrendously fucked over by any kind of fighting, any kind of war going on in low Earth orbit. Because there are no safe zones. There are no war zones and safe zones. There's no delineation. If you hit something in orbit, it is going to spread everywhere.
Fragments don't follow your ideology.
Yeah. And because of how much stuff, how dominated low Earth orbit is by civilian infrastructure instead of military infrastructure. It's one thing to blow up the GPS satellites. Those are legal military targets, even if they're mostly used for military stuff. But debris in low Earth orbit is going to screw over billions of people. And that's not even just from the fighting. That's going to persist after any fighting. It's basically, the way I was thinking of it is, it's like if an unexploded World War I bomb could just pick itself up and walk over to your house and then explode. And I did mention that these events have happened. This is not theoretical.
Imagining a world where there are smart weapons that just continue to exist dormant after the war, and then eventually one night just a 250 kilogram bomb on legs just walks into your house and explodes.
What are we talking, Team Fortress 2 Sentry Buster?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sentient UXO is terrifying to me. And I do have an example, because in 2013, the Russian Blitz satellite, that's BLITS, this was a small laser range-finding target. It was basically a big spherical lens fired into orbit. It was struck and destroyed by what is very suspected to be Fengyun debris. And since then, there have been all kinds of tiny impacts that people, if your satellite gets impacted but it keeps working, you just kind of go on with your life. But at least one very valuable satellite has been completely killed by the results of this test 6 years later. I don't know that I really have a thing to point to. I know there is a lesson, but there's the lesson that every single person listening to the show, no audience member of this show needs to be told that militarizing space and putting space debris everywhere is a bad idea. And yet that seems to be the track that we're going towards.
What about making another guy?
Oh.
Anti-space exploration accelerationist that doesn't want us to go to Mars and wants Kessler syndrome.
Yes, we need to lock ourselves in.
Anything possible to make sure that happens.
We're going to do Wall-E, except we're staying. This is just Stellaris militant isolationist. This is just Stellaris doing the Venice challenge. But yeah, that is the story of the 2007 Chinese anti-satellite test. We will definitely be talking a lot more about the militarization of space in the future, various different attempts at it, the implications. I'm hoping to have some experts on in the future to talk about it. But this is probably the main example that pops into people's heads whenever they think of an ASAT test and its consequences. How do you guys feel?
I feel more informed.
Yeah.
Just make it worse. Accelerate.
Yeah, just shotgun blast garbage into space. It gets it off the planet. And
oh, we need to talk about SPATSAT sometime.
Wait, what?
SPATSAT is whenever an ISS, sometimes in space stuff gets weird gunk on it because space is perpetually freezing and cooking the outside of your spacecraft.
Yeah.
So one astronaut had to go out on the ISS on a spacewalk with a spatula to scrape the gunk off. But then the spatula got all covered in gunk. So when asking, hey, what do I do with this? They were told just huck it. Just huck it in a direction. And that became SPATSAT.
It's still out there today, still covered in gunk. And if we ever got it back, it would be a relic.
This is how Prey 2017 starts, I'm pretty sure. The weird black space gunk that makes its way back to the ISS.
I want to find SpatSat now. I think that should be a life goal.
I
Is
think
to
it
find that
deorbited.
spat.
I will check, but it has. I believe it has tragically deorbited. But yeah, I hope everyone had fun with this. I hope you, listener, had fun with this. It was a little scattershot because
that's what happens when things break up in low Earth orbit. I mean, it goes everywhere.
But Tish. So yeah, listener, thank you for your time and goodbye.
Adios.
Thank you to everyone who has signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are August Sun, Boss, Charlie, Daniel F, David R, Ellie M, Jorg 2, Hippity Hoppity, this asteroid is now my property, Luke Nukem, Lupe G, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Nerd Beast, Noah, Oil Drum, Pat, Space Northpaw, Spectre Cohen, Tactical Spork, Tortilla Baron, and Vivek D. Our space dogs are a Union Thug, At Guy is Best Guy, Adam H, Angry Old Man Yada Yada, Anthony C, Otto Fox, Band User, Baron M, Ben L, Boomzilla, Brent D, Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G, Cole C, Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo, Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Hank, Aaron, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, I Hope You Have a Good Day, Ian W, Emmanuel L, JMM, James A, James C, Jamie K, John C, Johntastic 20x6, Kara, Chameleon, Kate D, Corbin the Dog, Korolev's Condiments, Lane of the Wired, Lens Wipe, M, McLean C, Mar, Nick S, Norman W, Panda, Randall, Sam A, Sean F, Sean H, Central Kazoo, Sean P, Sophie L, Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, That Big Sexy, The Best Sean, Thomas M, Tim P, Trash Do, Birosh T, Risk, Will W, Wingsmith, Zap, and Zim. Albert Count, 103. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcasts on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.